Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take your stack of sources and really distill them into the essential knowledge you need to grasp some of the world's most complicated stories.
That's right.
And today, we're embarking on a pretty big journey, a global tour of fragility, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
We're exploring 4 specific locations, these incredible sanctuaries of cultural, spiritual, and natural significance that are, well, let's just say they're teetering on an existential knife edge right now.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to rapidly get to the core knowledge around the Lascaux Caves in France, the vanishing Dead Sea, the sacred and explosive Mount Shasta, and the really deeply scarred history of Shimabara in Japan.
Wow, quite a list.
Yeah. And the common threads connecting these very diverse sites are pretty intense. They're facing threats from, geological instability, environmental collapse, the long shadow of historical trauma, and often, maybe most often, the just crushing weight of human interaction itself.
So we're really dissecting the anatomy of a sacred threat here. These places, they span, 17,000 years of human history, different global faith systems, and the relentless forces of plate tectonics and climate change.
Exactly.
And the core dilemma for pretty much all of them seems to be this tension between access and preservation. We feel this deep human need to connect with history, right?
Right.
But that connection, that single breath in a cave, that need for water from a river, that pilgrimage to a mountain is often the very thing that ends up destroying them.
It forces you, the listener, to really confront a difficult paradox. If the greatest wonder in the world is saved only by sealing it away from human eyes, does that preservation truly honor its purpose? I mean, if we love a treasure too much, is the only solution really exclusion?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see that question answered in some very different ways across this deep dive.
And, there's probably no more dramatic illustration of this paradox than the story we're kicking things off with. It's one of the most significant artistic discoveries in human history, made totally by accident and then nearly ruined by, adoration.
That's right.
We're heading into the limestone hills of the Dordogne region of France, the Lascaux Caves.
And the story itself, it really does feel like something out of a movie. The date was September 12th, 1940. Now, this was a dark time in French history, obviously.
Yeah.
But in the countryside near the village of Montignac, these 4 teenagers, Marcel Ravidat, Jacques Marçal, Georges Agnel, and Simon Coencus, they were out exploring a hillside. Apparently a large tree had recently fallen, exposing this narrow hole.
Okay.
And Marcel's dog, a terrier named Robot, great name, either chased something or maybe just stumbled into the opening. And the boys, well, they followed him down, armed with just these makeshift oil lamps.
Wow. So just kids and a dog stumbling onto it.
Yeah.
What exactly?
Well, what their flickering lamps lit up was a scene that had been perfectly preserved in darkness and constant temperature for approximately 17,000 years.
17,000 years.
Yeah. We're talking the Upper Paleolithic period. They had basically found the prehistoric Sistine Chapel, this incredibly intricate complex of chambers stretching over 250 meters.
It's hard to even process that time frame.
It really is. To put it in perspective, the art was created by the Cro-Magnon people, and this wasn't, a quick weekend project. Radiocarbon dating suggests the site was actively used and painted over several thousand years.
So like a multi-generational gallery.
Exactly. It completely redefined how we view the cognitive and artistic capabilities of early modern humans. I mean, these weren't primitive sketches. These were absolute masterpieces.
And the scale, I understand, is just mind-blowing.
Oh, yeah. In the most famous section, the Hall of the Bulls, you don't just find little drawings, you find monumental art. We're talking with the largest known animal figure in all of prehistoric cave art. An auroch, that's an extinct wild cattle rendered with stunning detail, measuring almost 17 feet long.
17 feet inside a cave.
Yeah, and the sophistication isn't just in the scale, it's in the technique, too. They clearly understood how to use the cave itself as a kind of 3-dimensional canvas.
How so?
Well, the artists incorporated the natural bulges and contours of the limestone walls to create this illusion of depth and movement, especially, you imagine, when viewed under the trembling light of a torch or an oil lamp.
Right.
They were using perspective in ways that, Western art supposedly discovered millennia later.
That's incredible. And we also know they were really ingenious with their tools, right? It wasn't just like finger painting. What were they actually using to get that kind of color and texture?
They had a surprisingly precise mineral-based palette. The black pigments came mostly from manganese dioxide and charcoal. The reds and yellows, which really dominate a lot of the space, were derived from iron oxides, ochres.
Hmm.
And white came from calcite, which was naturally right there in the cave.
And how did they apply it?
Their methods were pretty advanced. Our sources detail the use of primitive brushes, maybe made from animal hair or moss, but also the specific technique where they would blow powdered pigment through hollow bones.
Like a spray paint effect.
Exactly, a kind of Paleolithic spray paint effect. It let them cover large areas really uniformly.
That suggests, a level of organization and maybe even specialization way beyond just painting for survival, right?
Absolutely.
But if this was such a detailed, intentional, artistic project, here's the mystery that always gets me. Why did the Cro-Magnon artists focus so much on animals they didn't regularly eat?
Yes, that's a critical point, and it really challenges the old theories. If you look at the count, there are over 600 painted animals. We're talking 364 horses, 90 stags, 87 aurochs, loads of powerful animals. Yet the archaeological evidence from the same region, like food remains, shows that the primary food source for these people was actually the reindeer.
And reindeer are barely in the paintings.
Practically absent. It's bizarre. Furthermore, depictions of humans are extremely rare, and when they do appear, they're highly abstract or schematic, almost stick figure-like. It's a stark contrast to the realism of the animals.
So if the traditional hunting magic idea is true, paint what you want to kill to ensure success, why ignore your main food source? And why are the humans drawn so, simply?
It makes you question that whole theory, doesn't it?
Yeah. Does that suggest the art wasn't really about the hunt at all?
It definitely shifts the academic debate towards what's called the sanctuary theory. If the caves were just for hunting magic, you'd expect them to reflect the caloric reality of their lives, right?
Right. More reindeer.
Exactly. The fact that they depict these powerful, often dangerous animals like the massive aurochs and rhinos and ignore the common reindeer suggests more of a symbolic or spiritual function.
So like a sacred space.
Many scholars now believe Lascaux functioned as exactly that, a sacred space for complex rituals, perhaps related to initiation rites, maybe shamanism, or even astronomical observation. And supporting this idea are the difficult access points to certain chambers. You really had to want to get in there. And also the acoustic properties. Some chambers have specific echoes and resonances when you can't or make sounds in them.
Wow.
So the art, therefore, might have been connected to entering a kind of trance state or communicating with the spiritual realm, not just, planning dinner.
Okay, so we have the 17,000-year-old sanctuary, perfectly sealed by time, stable, dark, slightly humid environment. And then human adoration arrives. Lascaux opened to the public in 1948. What was the impact of that initial, giddy rush of people wanting to see it?
Oh, it was an absolute disaster from a conservation standpoint, driven entirely by pure enthusiasm and wonder. At its peak, the caves were seeing up to 1,200 visitors per day.
1,200 a day.
Per day. Now just try to imagine 1,200 human bodies, each one generating heat, each one exhaling large quantities of carbon dioxide, and each one introducing microscopic organic material into an environment that had been chemically static for millennia.
You can immediately see the problem. That change in the atmosphere, the heat, the CO2, the moisture from breath, it must have caused a full-scale biological crisis.
Precisely. The CO2 raised the temperature and the acidity inside the cave, which caused moisture to condense on the walls.
Okay.
And this triggered the rapid growth of algae and calcite deposits, forming these green and white films directly on the ancient pigments.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Irreplaceable layers of history were literally being obscured and consumed. And maybe more terrifyingly, specific strains of fungi and bacteria, including these dreaded black spots caused by organisms like Ochroconus humicola and Fusarium solani, began to colonize the artwork itself.
So they were basically fighting a biological war against 17,000-year-old art.
You could say that, yeah. It was a crisis that demanded a really radical choice. Either the art disappears or the public disappears.
And they chose the latter.
They had to. In 1963, French authorities very reluctantly sealed the caves entirely. Lascaux became once again a sanctuary, but this time preserved by exclusion from us.
Wow.
And today, access is incredibly restricted, limited to just a handful of conservators and researchers. And even then, they're still fighting this constant low-level battle against fungal outbreaks. It requires constant atmospheric regulation and treatment. The human touch, even just our breath, proved almost fatal.
But the preservation model that came out of this tragedy is actually maybe the most innovative part of the whole story now, isn't it? They realized human desire wouldn't just go away, so they created perfection through imitation.
It's the ultimate maybe necessary compromise. They understood that to keep the original safe, they absolutely had to satisfy the public's intense desire for the experience somehow.
So the replicas.
Exactly. Lascaux II, which is a high-fidelity replica focusing on the Hall of the Bulls, opened back in 1983. But the real game changer was Lascaux IV, which opened in 2016. This is a complete, immersive, really high-tech replica of the entire known cave system.
And what's fascinating about Lascaux IV, from what I understand, is how much work went into replicating the environment itself. They didn't just paint the pictures on flat walls.
No, not at all. They recreated the physical contours of the rock, the textures, the damp feel, even the acoustics and the specific atmospheric conditions. It's this enormous, painstaking technological effort.
Also that the original masterpiece can remain untouched, silent, and protected in the dark.
It's a very expensive insurance policy, you could say, but probably a necessary one. And it really highlights a key theme for this entire deep dive. Sometimes the only way to save our heritage is to create a kind of surrogate experience, accepting the huge cost and the technological difficulty involved.
So the Lascaux solution was preservation by exclusion and replication. Okay, now, let's pivot from a crisis caused by human breath to a crisis caused by human thirst in industry.
Right.
Let's move our focus dramatically south and east to the lowest point on dry land. The Dead Sea.
Ah, the Dead Sea. We all probably start with that iconic image, right? The floating experience.
Yeah, everyone's seen the pictures.
And that high density, that buoyancy, it's achieved because the Dead Sea is hypersaline. We're talking around 34% total salinity.
Which is
Nearly 10 times saltier than average ocean water. Just incredibly dense.
And geographically, it's located deep within the Jordan Rift Valley, part of that huge Great Rift Valley system. And it currently sits, 4,410 feet below sea level?
That's the current number, yes. But here's the key and really painful fact. That depth isn't static. It is currently decreasing at an alarming, honestly unprecedented rate.
Decreasing, so it's shrinking.
Rapidly. The Dead Sea is a terminal lake. That means the water that flows into the basin only leaves via evaporation. There's no outlet river. And given the intense climate there, really high heat, low humidity, and minimal rainfall, maybe 2 to 4 inches a year, evaporation is relentless, and that's why the minerals become so incredibly concentrated.
And its chemistry isn't typical saltwater, right? This mineral profile is why it's so famous for, therapeutic qualities.
Exactly. Our sources emphasize it's really high in magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, and potassium chloride, rather than just sodium chloride, which is table salt. Magnesium chloride alone makes up about 1/3 of the mineral content, and that's what gives the water that distinctively sort of oily or silky texture and that bitter taste.
And historically, it's such a vital place, referenced as the Salt Sea in ancient texts, and of course the incredibly dry microclimate along its northwestern shore, particularly near Qumran.
Ah, yes, Qumran.
That created the perfect environment to preserve the Dead Sea Scrolls for millennia.
Absolutely. That specific geological dryness gave us this revolutionary historical document that would have otherwise just crumbled to dust centuries ago. Amazing preservation.
But all that history, all that unique chemistry, all those therapeutic properties are now under this massive existential threat. We're talking about an environmental collapse happening in real time right now. How fast is this body of water actually vanishing?
The data is genuinely shocking. The water level is dropping approximately 3 feet per year.
3 feet every year.
Every single year. Since 1960, the Dead Sea has lost roughly 1/3 of its total surface area. It's visibly shrinking.
Wow.
At this current rate, scientific models are predicting it could vanish entirely within decades without some kind of major intervention.
3 feet a year. That magnitude suggests a cause far greater than just natural evaporation, surely.
Yeah.
What are the key drivers of this rapid decline? And how does geopolitical tension fit into this picture?
Well, the primary driver is almost entirely human and geopolitical. It's the massive, frankly, unsustainable diversion of the Jordan River.
Ah, the main water source.
Historically, yes. The Jordan was the Dead Sea's main inflow. But Israel, Jordan, and Syria have all built infrastructure, dams, canals, pipelines to divert this water upstream, mainly for crucial agricultural irrigation and domestic water supplies.
So the water just isn't reaching the Dead Sea anymore.
The inflow into the Dead Sea is now less than 10% of its historical volume. It's being starved.
Okay, that explains a lot. And then you add on the layer of industrial consumption, which I guess just makes the problem worse.
Yes, exactly. Both Israel and Jordan operate these large, competitive mineral harvesting industries right on the shores. They're extracting potash, bromine, magnesium valuable soluble stuff.
I did do that.
They pump the Dead Sea water into these vast evaporation ponds to accelerate the mineral extraction process. So they're effectively speeding up the water loss for commercial gain. It's really a dual crisis of water scarcity upstream and industrial greed downstream.
And this dramatic loss of water volume has led to probably the most visually striking consequence: the sinkholes. You see these pictures of roads, farm buildings, even parts of hotels just being swallowed by the ground. What's the geology behind that? How does that happen?
It's pretty terrifying. When the sea level was stable, the thick underlying salt layer near the shore was protected by the hypersaline water above it.
Okay.
But as the sea level drops dramatically, fresh groundwater from rainfall and underground aquifers now flows into these newly exposed coastal areas.
And fresh water dissolves salt.
Very quickly, it dissolves these massive underground salt deposits, creating vast hidden subterranean cavities. When the thin crust of surface soil over these hidden voids finally collapses under its own weight, poof.
You get a sinkhole.
A sudden, often massive, and potentially deadly sinkhole. There are thousands of them now, literally thousands, rendering huge swaths of the coastline unusable and incredibly dangerous.
The sea has also been physically divided now, hasn't it?
Mm.
Our sources mentioned the Lynch Straits Peninsula became exposed back in 1976.
That's correct. The Dead Sea is now permanently split into a distinct northern and a southern basin. The shallower southern basin, which is where many of the industrial evaporation ponds are located, now has to be artificially maintained. Companies actually have to pump water from the ever-shrinking northern basin into the southern basin just to keep their operations viable, which of course further taxes the already stressed northern basin and the entire ecosystem. It's a vicious cycle.
The stakes are so incredibly high that they've proposed one of the most audacious, maybe desperate environmental engineering projects in modern history, the Red Sea-Dead Sea Canal project. This sounds like potentially an incredible fix, but what are the major risks involved?
Well, the scale of the plan is just massive. We're talking about piping huge volumes of water overland from the Red Sea, hundreds of kilometers away, up to the Dead Sea to try and stabilize the level.
Okay.
The elevation drop between the two could theoretically generate hydroelectric power, and the project could also provide much-needed desalinated drinking water to this incredibly arid region. So there are potential benefits.
But the but sounds pretty big.
Oh, it's huge. The risks are immense and have caused years of delays and disputes. The primary fear is massive environmental disruption. Red Sea water has a different chemical composition and density than Dead Sea water.
Right.
Introducing it could fundamentally change the Dead Sea's unique chemistry. There are fears it could cause massive whitening events due to gypsum precipitation, which would basically ruin the therapeutic properties and the unique microbial ecosystem that currently exists.
So it could save the water level, but kill the Dead Sea's character.
Potentially, yes. Plus, there are serious risks of introducing invasive species from the Red Sea into this very isolated environment. Ecologically fraught.
It really seems like a classic dilemma, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you risk this massive, expensive, ecologically uncertain intervention to save something that's actively dying, primarily because of human conflict and industrial demand?
It's a crisis built entirely on regional cooperation, or maybe the lack thereof.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate reflection of human demands, just completely overriding natural limits.
Okay, moving from this environmental collapse in the lowest point on Earth, let's pivot dramatically again. Let's head to one of the highest and most powerful geological features in the United States, the majestic but highly volatile Mount Shasta in Northern California. This thing is a giant, a stratovolcano, rising to a staggering 14,179 feet.
Shasta is absolutely the quintessential imposing landmark. It just dominates the entire horizon, defining the southern end of the Cascade Volcanic Arc. You can easily spot its massive, often snow-capped cone structure from over 100 miles away on a clear day.
Wow.
And geologically speaking, it's not actually a single mountain, but a complex of 4 overlapping volcanic cones that have been built up over hundreds of thousands of years. That includes the substantial subsidiary peak, Shastina, which is itself the 3rd highest peak in the Cascade Range.
But while it inspires all this awe, we have to confront the reality that this isn't just a pretty dormant peak. It's an active, heavily monitored threat.
Yeah.
What's the official assessment of its danger level?
The United States Geological Survey, the USGS, classifies Mount Shasta as a very high-threat volcano. That's their highest category, basically.
Very high threat. Why?
That classification is due to both its pretty explosive eruptive history and its proximity to populated areas. You've got communities like Weed and Mount Shasta City that lie directly in potential paths for lava flows, pyroclastic flows, and especially lahars.
Lahars.
Destructive mudflows, yeah, triggered by eruptions melting the snow and ice. And the volcano sits right above the subduction zone where the Juan de Fuca plate is diving beneath the North American plate. That's the engine driving the entire Cascade Chain's volcanic activity.
So if we look at its historical behavior, what kind of timeline are we actually working with? Is this volcano genuinely a ticking clock?
Well, the geologic history suggests it's had a significant eruption approximately every 800 years or so over the last 10,000 years.
Okay.
The most recent major eruptive event seems to have occurred around 1250 CE. So yeah, based on averages, you could say the clock is ticking. The hazard is definitely real.
And that hazard includes
Everything from explosive eruptions generating pyroclastic flows and lava flows to widespread ashfall that could disrupt things for hundreds of miles. And maybe most critically for the immediate vicinity, those massive destructive lahars triggered by the melting of its extensive glaciers and snowpack.
So we have this incredibly volatile geological feature capable of immense destruction, and yet it's perhaps the single greatest spiritual magnet in the continental U.S. There's this deep, ancient reverence for this mountain, isn't there?
Absolutely. Its spiritual significance goes way back, predating modern history entirely. It's rooted deeply in indigenous traditions. For the local Shasta, Modoc, and Wintu tribes, the mountain is inherently sacred. It's considered the dwelling place of the Great Spirit, central to their creation stories, a place that demands profound respect and, frankly, caution. It's the origin point of their world.
And this ancient sacred heritage has kind of evolved or maybe mutated into a very different modern phenomenon, right? Since the 1930s or so, Shasta has become synonymous with New Age mysticism. This is where we get the legends of lost continents and energy vortices.
Yeah, it's a fascinating synthesis, or maybe layering, of different belief systems. Many modern spiritual seekers regard Shasta as a unique metaphysical power vortex, a global energy center with special properties.
Okay.
But the most popular and maybe the least scientifically grounded narratives definitely concern the hidden civilization of Telos.
Tell us.
Supposedly a highly advanced subterranean city located deep beneath the mountain, populated by survivors from the lost continent of Lemuria.
Lemuria, right.
Now, these stories, while pretty clearly mythological, draw pilgrims and spiritual entrepreneurs, healers, channelers, you name it, from all around the globe. They come seeking contact or just the energy.
So the small gateway community right at its base, Mount Shasta City,
Yeah.
population around 3,400, must be an incredibly eclectic place. It's blending hardcore outdoor recreation with this really intense spiritual focus.
It is a remarkable mix. I mean, on one hand, you have the serious gear shops catering to mountaineers aiming for the summit. And right next door, you might have metaphysical crystal shops, healing centers, retreat facilities aimed at people trying to connect with Lemurian energy or just seeking spiritual rejuvenation. The local culture is this unique negotiation between the very real physical hazards and the transcendental claims.
Speaking of physical hazards, let's talk about the mountaineering side for a second. 14,000 feet is a serious climb. Our sources indicate something like 15,000 people attempt the summit each year. What does the success rate tell us about the mountain's actual difficulty?
Well, it really emphasizes the sheer physical challenge. Only about 30 to 35% of those attempts actually succeed in reaching the summit.
Wow, that low.
Yeah. This isn't just a strenuous hike. The standard route, Avalanche Gulch, involves navigating really steep snow and ice fields. The altitude is brutal for most people, and severe, rapidly developing storms are incredibly common, even in summer.
So it's dangerous.
Very. The mountain demands respect. It generates numerous search and rescue operations every single year and, sadly, has claimed many lives over the decades. The spiritual magnet is physically unforgiving.
And the mountain's function as a crucial water source for the region is also under threat, isn't it? Reflecting that broader climate change narrative. How are Shasta's glaciers holding up?
Yeah, that's another critical layer. Shasta plays a vital role in capturing Pacific moisture, and that sustains 7 named glaciers, including the really immense Whitney Glacier. These glaciers are essential natural reservoirs.
Providing water downstream.
Exactly. They provide critical meltwater during the dry California summer months for agriculture and communities all throughout the Sacramento Valley. But climate scientists report that these glaciers have been retreating significantly over the past century. It's a clear and very tangible indicator of rising regional temperatures.
So the mountain is both a kind of spiritual time bomb geologically And also a melting water bank due to climate change.
That sums it up pretty well. It's this ultimate collision point. You've got the ancient reverence, the very real modern geological danger, the search for hidden civilizations, and the slow, inevitable creep of global warming impacting its vital glaciers.
It really forces the question of how a community prepares for a potentially catastrophic geological event, while simultaneously embracing the mystical properties that draw so many people to land in the first place.
Absolutely. And that tension between geological fate and human faith provides a perfect transition, actually. We're now going to move across the Pacific to Japan, to a place where geological and human fury collided in a cataclysm that absolutely defined Japanese history, Shimabara City in Nagasaki Prefecture.
Shimabara today, from the descriptions, sounds incredibly peaceful. It's known for its abundant, clean, natural springs, apparently over 60 sources, and these picturesque water channels where colorful koi fish swim freely through the town. It seems like a haven.
It does on the surface.
Yet it rests on this foundation of really profound historical violence.
That history is the Shimabara Rebellion of 1637-1638. This was the largest single-armed uprising against the powerful Tokugawa shogunate during the early Edo period. And we need to be clear, this was not a minor skirmish. It was a defining moment of national policy and, frankly, incredible brutality.
What forces drove the peasants and the local populace, including Christian converts, to rise up against such an overwhelming centralized power like the Tokugawa shogunate?
It was a truly horrific mix of extreme economic hardship and escalating religious persecution. The local feudal lords, particularly a man named Matsukura Katsui, imposed crippling, often literally impossible, taxation levels. They demanded rice payments that far exceeded what the impoverished farmers could possibly produce.
So starvation taxes, basically.
Essentially, and our sources detail specific, abhorrent methods of torture used to extract these payments when people couldn't pay, including the infamous straw coat torture, where peasants were wrapped tightly in straw mats, tied up, and then set on fire.
Oh my God. That level of cruelty is almost unimaginable. It's no wonder the population, which included a large number of these persecuted Christian converts and also ronin, masterless samurai, reached this kind of fever pitch of desperation.
Their desperation eventually coalesced around this central, very charismatic figure, Amakusa Shiro. He was just 16 years old, a Christian convert himself.
16. Leading a rebellion.
Yes. His followers apparently believed he possessed divine powers, positioning him as a kind of messianic figure for their cause. Approximately 37,000 people, men, women, and children, joined this rebellion and fortified themselves within the walls of the abandoned Hura castle on the coast.
So a massive, but presumably poorly equipped army of peasants, some samurai and whole families, besieged by the full military might of the shogunate. How did that play out?
The shogunate responded absolutely ruthlessly, assembling an overwhelming force of over 125,000 warriors. The siege of Hura Castle lasted for months. The rebels held out, facing starvation and constant bombardment until April 1638.
And the end
Was brutal. In a really telling detail about the global context at the time, the shogunate actually requested military assistance from Dutch trading ships anchored nearby to bombard the castle from the sea.
Wow, foreign intervention.
Yeah, showcasing the intense multinational effort they felt was required to finally quell this uprising.
And the ultimate defeat was total.
Total and absolute. The shogunate forces finally breached the castle walls and conducted a full massacre. Best estimates are that approximately 37,000 people died in the rebellion, almost everyone inside the castle.
37,000.
Yeah. There are reports of only about 100 survivors, and nearly all of them were later rounded up and executed. That included Amakusa Shiro himself, whose head was publicly displayed in Nagasaki as a chilling warning against any further dissent, especially dissent linked to foreign influence like Christianity.
That level of violence must have had immediate, far-reaching political consequences for Japan, defining its interaction with the outside world for centuries to come.
Absolutely. The Shimabara Rebellion is seen as directly fueling the intensification of the sakuku, or closed country, policy. The shogunate became deeply suspicious of foreign influence, particularly Catholic powers like Portugal and Spain. They severely restricted almost all foreign contact, expelled the Portuguese entirely, who they blamed for fomenting the Christian resistance.
And this established that period of near total isolation that lasted, what, over 200 years?
Yeah, well into the mid-19th century.
And it also gave rise to one of the most incredible stories of religious endurance anywhere, the Kakuer Kirishitan. the hidden Christians.
This is a truly profound cultural legacy born from that persecution. Because Christianity was utterly banned and ruthlessly suppressed after Shimabara, Japanese Christians were forced to practice their faith entirely in secret for generations for over 2 centuries.
How do they even manage that?
The shogunate enforced this famous temple registration system, the Toroku system, requiring every single family in Japan to be registered with a local Buddhist temple, proving they weren't Christian. So these hidden Christians developed unique syncretic traditions. They blended Christian prayers and concepts with Buddhist or Shinto ritual language and iconography to maintain secrecy, passing their faith down generationally under immense duress and the constant threat of discovery and execution.
Just an incredible story of resilience. So Shimabara is a place defined by human-made fire and fury. But just like Mount Shasta, it's also defined by geological instability, connecting that historical trauma to a very modern hazard.
That's right. Shimabara sits directly at the base of the active volcanic complex, Mount Unzen, and the region experienced a massive, devastating eruption cycle relatively recently, between 1990 and 1995. It was a stark reminder to residents that the fury of nature is just as present there as the fury of history.
And the catastrophe of June 3rd, 1991, is particularly significant, isn't it? Because it claimed the lives of dedicated researchers who were there studying the volcano. What happened on that specific day?
Yeah, that was a tragic day. It saw a massive pyroclastic flow that's a fast-moving, superheated cloud of gas, ash, and rock suddenly raced down the mountainside at incredible speed. It killed 43 people who were in its path.
Oh, terrible.
And tragically, among the victims were some of the world's most renowned and respected volcanologists, including the American Harry Glicken and the incredibly dynamic French husband and wife team, Maurice and Katja Kraft. They had dedicated their lives to documenting volcanic hazards up close, often taking huge risks to get amazing footage. Their deaths really underscored the immense, unpredictable power of the Unzen complex.
So today, Shimabara represents this incredible juxtaposition. You have the reconstructed Shimabara Castle, which houses museum exhibits detailing the rebellion and the hidden Christians. But the physical experience of the modern city seems to be one of water and healing.
Exactly. The abundance of natural hot springs, the onsen, offers these therapeutic mineral baths. It's a tradition of peace and healing, right in a city defined by mass slaughter and volcanic threat. Even the unique local culinary heritage, things like the sweet, Portuguese-influenced confection called quenqueromo, subtly reflects that complex history of European contact, faith, persecution, and resilience.
So it's a place of profound, maybe fragile beauty, built right atop the memory of terrible oppression and ongoing geological violence.
It seems like the constant geological threat almost forces the community to process its historical trauma and remember its resilience, all while, watching koi swim peacefully through crystal clear water channels. It's a powerful lesson in human and environmental persistence.
We have now completed our deep dive into these 4 incredibly fragile sanctuaries, and I think it's time to try and connect the dots, maybe pull out the main themes. The common thread seems pretty clear. These are all places where fundamental human desires for art, for water, for faith, for safety, for connection, inevitably butt up against either hard natural limits or sometimes the devastating consequences of those very desires.
Absolutely. And we've uncovered some staggeringly specific facts that really illustrate this fragility. You have Lascaux' 17,000-year-old art, almost ruined by the simple carbon dioxide exhaled by 1,200 visitors a day, requiring its absolute sealing and the creation of these perfect, incredibly costly replicas.
Right, preservation by imitation. Then we have the Dead Sea, literally vanishing at a rate of 3 feet per year, a crisis driven primarily by the geopolitical diversion of the Jordan River for human thirst and agriculture, leading to the actual physical collapse of the shoreline through thousands of massive sinkholes. It's truly a life or death scenario for a biblical landmark.
Then we visited Mount Shasta, a massive stratovolcano sitting on a roughly 800-year eruption clock, classified as a very high threat. Yet it simultaneously attracts thousands of spiritual seekers and high-risk mountaineers, while its essential glaciers retreat rapidly due to global warming, threatening the water supply for a huge region.
That mix of threat and allure. And finally, Shimabara, where the historical trauma of 37,000 deaths in one horrific rebellion, a rebellion rooted in impossible taxation and torture, led directly to 2 centuries of hidden faith, only to be revisited by the modern fire of the Mount Unzen pyroclastic flow that tragically killed leading volcanologists observing it.
This central tension in all these stories is just unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's preservation versus access. Lascaux ultimately solved it with technological exclusion. The Dead Sea seems to require massive ecologically risky engineering projects just to maybe refill itself. And places like Shasta and Shimabara force communities to literally live in high-risk zones, constantly balancing spiritual heritage or natural beauty with the need for hazard preparedness.
What really stands out is that in almost every case, the solution or the response required an immense, almost disproportionate human effort. Whether it's constructing a perfect replica of a cave, planning a major intersea canal, or maintaining a secret faith for generations under the constant threat of execution.
And maybe that immense effort itself underscored how highly we humans value these unique places, whether it's Paleolithic art that connects us to our deep past, or a unique mineral composition with perceived healing properties. We seem willing to risk enormous resources, push technological boundaries, and sometimes even risk life itself to maintain their existence or our connection to them.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with this final, maybe provocative thought. If the perceived value of these sanctuaries lies so much in the unique experience they offer, that spiritual connection on Shasta, the awe of seeing the aurochs in Lascaux, the uncanny float of the Dead Sea, is the necessary choice of exclusion, of sealing away the actual treasure to save it for an abstract future, perhaps a betrayal of the very human impulse that made these places sacred or special to us in the first place.